Welcome to part two of our web performance series here. I'm sitting here with Jeff Darnton. So, without further ado, what is pre-rendering?
Yeah, pre-rendering is another kind of technical SEO term that we're using, and it's a technique where you render a page. That's why it's called pre-rendering, but that page is rendered on the server side, meaning that we pre-load the page and then send that to the browser as a rendered page rather than sending all the pieces and parts. And we kind of talked about that in our last series, how the page comes together of all those different components. So instead of sending a list of a bunch of components and allowing the client side to assemble those, we actually do that on the server and send it down to the client ahead of time.
For those of us like those listening today focused on kind of revenue and growth, why should they care about pre-rendering? Like, what's the real business impact here?
As the internet has become more kind of content rich and media rich, and we've gotten used to really interactive websites as well as very customized websites and personalized content and experimentation and all kinds of very dynamic content, along with video and a variety of different things. All that has been awesome for a user experience. But what that's made is the page very heavily dependent on JavaScript or other types of calls in order to assemble that page together. Search engine crawlers don't care about any of that. They're looking for what the resulting content is, and actually those crawlers don't do a very good job of assembling that page with all of those pieces and parts. And so the more kind of complex your page is, the more dynamic the page is, may be great for a user experience, but it can actually penalize you from an SEO perspective and mean that you could get poorer rankings or not ranked at all because the search engine can't understand what's going on that particular page. So from an SEO standpoint, we're always trying to get better rankings. And so this is one of the techniques we could use to do that, because we're really meaning, or we want to optimize that page for our audience. And remember, our audience in this scenario is not the end user for the first time. We're really thinking about, what does the bot want to see?
Okay, so I want to clarify something here because it sounds like there's two sides of pre-rendering here. There's one side where you're pre-rendering on origin and delivering that to all users. And there's this other side where we're pre-rendering specifically for bots and
Right.
delivering them a different type of pre-rendered. How do we separate the traffic there, and why is that why is that important? Why should we be doing that?
Yeah, right. And it's like I said, when we're doing pre-rendering for bots, it's pretty straightforward. I say straightforward, probably should be in quotes, but more straightforward, I guess, than I would say for end users, because generally we're not worried about that personalized content. You don't
Yeah.
necessarily need to see, here's our top 5 recommended products, or other users are looking at these products right now. That content is less important for a bot than it is for a human, because we're trying to kind of drive different behaviors there. So generally, when we talk to customers, the first point that we're talking about pre-rendering is really around just for bots. So it's focused on, one, when we get that page faster, we talked
Mhm.
about that, yes, performance is a part of your Google search ranking, and your core web vitals are an important piece. And so improving those helps your search ranking. But two, as you're loading that page faster, it means that Google can crawl more of your site. So there's this concept of a crawl budget, and it's basically how many pages can I load in how much period of time, and Google gives you that budget and it works through your site. Or any, I'm using Google here, but it could be any, different
Yeah.
SEO. They all operate very similar, but I think the one that we focus on the most is Google. And so I can get more pages loaded in a particular period of time if they're loading faster. So pre-render not only makes an individual page faster, but it makes my overall site crawl faster, which means I get better coverage. So now I've got better performance per page, as well as more pages getting crawled. So I've got more of my products or more percentage of my site displayed in those SEO rankings as well. So those two key pieces are why we look at pre-render as an opportunity to improve SEO.
Okay. So speaking of the crawl budgets and those use cases, who's coming up against their limitations on crawl budgets? Like, doesn't that give a pretty substantial amount of time? Like, well, are people pushing up against that?
Yeah, you'd be surprised. I mean, so again, as we see retailers expanding their product catalog, we're not talking thousands of items here. We might be talking millions of items. And particularly as retailers maybe look at more of like a marketplace play, or they're using third-party providers, or again, they're letting people list products for themselves on their site, that product catalog just explodes. And so and it's also dynamically changing all the time, right? You're adding and removing
Yeah.
products. So there's no way that you're ever going to get the search engine to crawl your entirety of your site every single day or even every single week. And so we want to make sure that we're optimizing to get the maximum coverage there possible.
So then bringing this back to the Harper verse, how's Harper? What are we doing with pre-rendering today, and who's really benefiting from this?
Yeah. So we do a couple different pieces of pre-render. So one is the actual rendering of the site itself. And so we would load this page and say, hey, here's what it looks like. And then we store what we would call a static HTML copy of that. And we would cache that in our database. We don't do that synchronously, right? One way we could do this is just act as a proxy. And anytime a bot requests something, it proxies through us, we go and get that from origin, and then we cache it and serve it back. What we actually do is we proactively crawl your site ahead of time. And so we either use a site map that you might have already, or we can generate one for you. But essentially at a periodic time, we're actually going out and proactively getting the content that's changed from your site and bringing that into the Harper database and having that stored there so that every single time Google or whatever search engine is coming in, they're always getting a pre-rendered page from us, and you're never seeing that impact of load at origin there. So there's two pieces. That one is, again, generating or reading the sitemap, to proactively crawling and getting all of that content into the database, and we're kind of pulling it in rather than it being pushed by our customers. And then three, responding to the load that's coming in from those crawlers. And so those are the kind of three building blocks that are there. And not every provider does it that way. Again, some of them really act as the proxy and kind of do it on a request-based piece there. And that's fine. We just find that this is better, particularly when we have those retailers that have hugely long tail content, because what we're trying to do is increase the crawlability. So we want to have that content there and take the maximum advantage rather than have to go fetch those long tail pieces and have that not necessarily be pre-rendered or not necessarily respond in the most performant way. So that's how we approach it. And again, that makes it so that truly you don't have to do anything, right? Your team is probably already maintaining a sitemap for a variety of reasons. And if you're not, again, we could help generate one or we can help optimize it, but you're already doing that. And so we get to take a tool that you're already maintaining and we get to go use it for that SEO optimization without you having to take on any extra.
I'm looking at this from like just like an infrastructure perspective. Like there's one thing to pre-render it, but it's another thing to have that close to where the bots are originating from, because part of this equation is the network latency. How do we position these servers to ensure that we're really minimizing overall latency for each page that loads?
Right. Yeah, it's a really good point. And so we always talk about doing things at the edge, right? And we want to be as close to the edge as possible. And when we say edge here, it's close to whatever the end users are. And we're always thinking about that in terms of our end users, which is generally the people that are going to our customer site to buy something. And they may be in a particular country, or they may be spread all over the world, and we want to be close to them. Who's the customer in this scenario? It's the SEO bots. And so those bots generally originate from a particular place. So Googlebot originates from certain data centers within the US. We want to be close to those, not necessarily close to all of our end users. So this is a different user population that we want to be, and we want to understand where our bots originate from, and we want to be close to those locations. And so the way that we position the clusters for pre-rendering is different than how we position it for some of our other solutions that are being consumed by end users. And so understanding which of the bots we're optimizing for, again, generally it's going to be Googlebot or Bigbot, or which ones we want to, penalize. Like maybe we don't want to serve our content very effectively to an AI training model, and we want to penalize that. We can make decisions about where to place and how to serve, but it's a different deployment of how we think about load here and what our edge needs to be versus what.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. Put it close to the bots where they're originating.
Right.
Yeah,
you think about bots are just on the internet, and they are, and generally those malicious bots are, but these well-behaved SEO bots, like they'll tell you what their user agent is, what networks they're going to originate from. When they crawl, you can see it in the search console. So like when we have a well-behaved population here, let's cater to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Any last things you want to include in this, or anything you want to share?
Well, all I would say is, again, this is another tool in the toolbox, and we're talking about kind of technical SEO tools. And so these are things you should do. They're not exclusively the only things you should do. But when we talk about these different building blocks, doing this plus this plus this is going to increase your performance and then increase your search ranking. So look at each of these as a building block. And it's not, I'm going to do this or this. It's starting to layer these on top of each other to increase that outcome. And again, doing all of that in a way with a provider like Harper makes it very, very easy on your team to go ahead and get those benefits right now today without having to re-platform and re-architect and make those priority trade-offs within. So when you're considering pre-render, look at a different service to provide that, because you get all of those benefits right away and you get that offload. You don't have to worry about it back at origin plots.
Makes sense. Thank you, Jeff. It was great talking with you today. And we'll catch you on the part 3 of the series coming next week. So
Thanks,
see you
Alek.
then. See ya. Bye.